the last speaker is often difficult because the only thing that's in between you and the beer is me. So if you want to start drinking now, make sure I get one first, and we'll make sure that for the next several hours we do have a lot of the things to talk about. This year represents my 30th year in information security. I still don't understand it. It's really, really hard. And over the last 30 years, I've had a lot of opportunities to do a lot of really fun, great things. And last year I was asked to kind of put together some ideas of where I think things are going within the field. What have we done right? What have we done wrong? And I'm going to kind of present some of these ideas, and some of them really scare what I call the living IT out of me. Some of them aren't so bad. But I'm also going to put a challenge to you in the community, not just here in Holland, but in Germany and France, the United States and Canada and Asia, where the community understands the problems in many ways far better than organizations and governments do. I want to put the challenge to you that as I present some of these ideas, that maybe one or two of them, you can actually do something more than just hack it. You might actually be able to fix it, or come up with some really new ideas and new ways of doing things, because I know that so much of the technology I touch today is the same stuff I've been touching for 30 years, and it still doesn't work, yet we're running the planet on it. So we need to do some serious rethinking, and this is why I call it the history of the future. What scares the living IT out of me? My wife snoring. Anybody know who that's a picture of? Anybody? There's a clue on the slide. It's my wife. Of course it is. Who said that? All right, be careful. There you go. Oh, I do throw books. Be careful. Back in the late 80s, when I got involved in this space, I started worrying about privacy and espionage and cyber war, and Congress said to me I was out of my mind. None of this is going to happen. Why would the bad guys ever want to use the internet, was what the US Congress asked me. So I did a lot of predicting and a lot of ideas that scared the bejesus out of me 30 years ago. And they still do, because we haven't done very much about it. If anything, we're in much worse shape. And we're going to cover some of those things that really, really bother me. So we're going to look at the three basic triads or domains I look up there. What's wrong with this picture? Who said that first? Yeah, watch your head. Whoa, there it comes. Just want to make sure you're awake at 5 o'clock. There's three main domains, and the first is the human. We unfortunately tend to look at technology, and the media talks about technology and all this great tech stuff that's going on, but when we really find out how many problems that are occurring out there in the cyber world, whatever you want to call it, how many of them are really human-based? We've ignored it because we don't know how to control it. So it's better, we'll throw technology, we'll patch the human. That works really, really well, doesn't it? So, in the domain of human, what really scares the living bejesus out of me? Them. For those of you not from the United States, that's US Congress. Apathy, arrogance, and ignorance, and now they're planning on passing more and more cybersecurity laws in order to help us. And these are lawyers. These guys who never thought the bad guys could use the internet, or the internet would be anything but wonderful for the world, now are suddenly concerned. This really scares me as to what they're going to try to do and what equivalent governing organizations in Europe and in Asia are going to consider to do as well. How much more can they screw it up by getting involved? An awful lot is my fear. It really bothers me that nobody really seems to care. Right now, in the last several weeks, we've seen some noise, and we've seen the Mandiant report, and China's doing this, South Korea, North Korea, and Iran, and we're seeing all of this stuff. But 30 years it's taken for people to start talking about it in an open forum. That tells me people don't give a shit. They don't care. And part of our responsibility is to get them to care a lot more than they do, especially in the human domain, because this is where so many of the failings have been, because we're designing technology for technocrats, not for Ma and Pa and Bob and Sheila. We're designing stuff for the wrong people. We've got probably in the United States a lot more. We have the non-global view. The U.S. is the center of the universe. Everything around the whole world centers around the United States, and therefore any rules and policies and concepts ought to be American. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that is not true. We have a very myopic view, and it's events like this that are outside of the United States that really, really help try to get that non-U.S. centric view. I believe the figure is 13% of U.S. citizens now can legally travel internationally. Why? Only 13% of us have passports. So we've got a very myopic view. I live in a county, and a county would be like a burg or a shire up in England. And many people, thousands upon thousands of them, never leave the county for their entire lives. And we're connecting them to the rest of the world. We wonder why we have non-global views, and this gets back to educational problems, and this is, in my mind, predominantly a U.S. problem, but if we carry the big stick, we also have the big responsibility to put ourselves and the rest of the world in an appropriate context when it means trying to keep this whole thing working all the time. China, obviously. September 1998, I was doing some training with Special Operations Forces at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and during that week, Chinese PLA, People's Liberation Army, came up with a document, and it was called Unrestricted Warfare. And for those of you that are familiar with history, Germany and Mexico did the same thing in 1917 when Germany tried to get Mexico to invade the United States, and that was called the original Zimmerman Telegram, Unrestricted Warfare. China did the same thing in 1998. They published a 240-page book, and it said fundamentally, in a conventional war with the United States, we lose. In a nuclear war with the United States, we lose. Therefore, we're going to change the rules. We're going to go asymmetric. We hereby declare the critical infrastructures and economic private interests of the United States to be legitimate targets of conflict. What have they been doing for the last 15 years? Is this a big surprise? This goes back to the apathy, ignorance, and arrogance from too many of our leaders. It's not a problem. No, don't worry about it. Fundamentally, they don't get it. They don't understand enough of what we're living around, what the technology is, and what can be done to have any handle that, yes, you should have been worried about this a long, long time ago. What is the dirtiest four-letter word you can think of for security? No, wait for the question. For security. Safe? Shit? User, who said that? All right, watch your heads. Yeah, here it comes. User, of course. Users are our penultimate problem. We blame the users. We do training in security and awareness, and 41% of them still screw it up when they're tested the next day. We all love our users. We want our users to be productive, but they're the ones that are really, really screwing it up. We want everybody to be connected, yet those means more users. How many users can we sustain? Right now, according to some figures, there's 6 billion active intelligent endpoint users on the planet. How many of them know what they're doing technically? Anybody? Any idea? You're going to give it 5%. I give it 0.005%, 3 million people. And I cannot defend that number at all, but I don't believe that there's 300 million techs around the planet right now. Seriously, 300 million. But that brings up then, what is the second dirtiest word we can think of when it comes to security. There is a clue. Who said what? What'd you say? Root. Is that what you said? Yeah. Watch your head. Root, of course. Why the hell are we still dealing with root authority? Why? Sometimes spouses have to have 2 signatures on a check to write a big check so that everybody knows what's going on. Many banking organizations, 2 signatures in order to make sure, sanity check what's going on. Why don't we have this in operating systems? Why don't we have it in operating environments, inside of applications, inside of mission critical operations? Why do we still have root? It is beyond me that it still exists, and it scares the hell out of me because we give multiple controls, and I have a mathematical treatise coming out in the next few months that will show mathematically how bad this is, using multiple root users using Boolean OR logic. And the mathematics is staggering, showing how incredibly dumb we are and how bad things have gotten. In the United States, this is really considered improper. Profiling. I love profiling people. We profile packets, find out what's good, what's bad. We profile traffic, what's good, what's bad, what might be an indication and warning. But we're not allowed to profile people's behavior because that's politically incorrect and it might violate your rights. It's insane that we give away the root controls to people in organizations with gobs to lose for mission critical operations, yet we're not allowed to profile them. However, under the traditional way of America's looking at it, what you guys do at airports here, and you walk up before you get to the ticket counter, and a very nice young-looking couple says, "Hi, Winn, where you been? What you been doing?" And we chat up for about 30 seconds, and they're profiling me. They're looking for my eyes to do something, but the one word they're fundamentally looking for is deception. Do I have any element of deception in my reaction or in my interaction with them? If I do, then they'll take me over, send me to TSA, and let the Americans deal with me, maybe. But in the States, we're not allowed to do that. Everybody is guilty at all times until proven innocent. And so we have to, in order to start making this system work inside of mission-critical places, we have to get some serious profiling going. Because if we don't, we're going to end up with worse conditions than we currently have, especially when it comes to senior management and senior technical leadership and administration throughout all of our respective organizations. Lawyers, we love lawyers. Any lawyers in the room? Anybody want to admit being a lawyer? Nobody, everybody, all the lawyers are getting low right now. Lawyers are the ones who are causing so much of this problem. This is all, again, under the human domain. They do not understand the consequences of what they're thinking about, the dictums that come out of their mouths, the crazy things they say, and them trying to make us politically correct. Why can, in the United States, why is it so ridiculously hard for us to fire somebody who clearly violates policy, causes a security incident inside of an organization? Why can't we fire them? Because the lawyers are scared that the person they fire is going to sue the company and it's going to cost them more money than doing the right thing. It's stupid. We have to get over this and start really dealing with the human domain the way that people need to be dealt with. Now this crosses over into something that really, really bothers me. And I don't know the answer right now, and it ties together between human domain and a little bit of technical. I'm originally from New York. When you walk down the streets, if somebody tries to mug you, you're allowed to take away his knife or his gun, or you can run like hell. You have the right to defend yourself. In our world, and specifically the laws I am most familiar with are those in the United States, it is illegal for me to remove your cyber weapon. Think of that for a second. Not only can I not shoot you, not only can I take no offensive action, I cannot defend myself by removing your weapon system. And that is the current state of the law. Does that make any sense? Now, there are certainly some legitimate arguments here about proportionality, proportional response, proper indications and warnings, identification, false attribution. Yes, these are all legitimate pieces of the puzzle. But at the same time, because it seems to be a hard problem and it's a human thing, we have not taken the time to examine, how do we solve this problem? How do we design a construct, whether it's legal or technical, or some combination of the two, that allows me to remove your weapon system if you're doing something hostile to me? I think it's something we desperately, desperately need, and I think the community at large would be great to have discussion points on this to really analyze what we can do, whether it's open source, commercial products, doesn't matter. The second domain gets into the technical stuff, and that's where a lot of this conversation has been going on. And there's just so many things that we tend to automatically put into the technical domain without really realizing that they connect to the human element, they connect to the physical element. I remember in the early days, people would say, cyberspace is virtual, it doesn't exist anywhere. And I go, well, wait a minute, there's a router, there's a wire, there's a hard drive, there's a magnetic domain. Where's the virtuality? There is a strong physical component to this that you're completely ignoring. And now that we're seeing attention made to ICS and SCADA systems going on, anybody old enough in the room with me to remember some of the early software viruses back in the 80s that would make the heads chatter up and down and eat the hard drives? Yeah, a few hands on that. I mean, it's hostile, but it was cool to prove the point. And finally, somebody actually did start redesigning hard drives, and the heads are operated in a different manner. So some of the things technically that really, really bother me, these guys. No offense to the vendors here, because all the vendors that are here are perfect and wonderful. I know this. And I'm not going to pick on any one vendor at all. I was just at RSA, and I was really pissed off. I wrote an article on it in SC Magazine, and it says I was disgusted with RSA. And I was disgusted for two main reasons. Number one, why we need big-breasted women with iPads inserted into their shirts to attract me to their booth, I didn't think made sense. Number two, once you're attracted into the booth, finding somebody that could speak technically about their own products and services was impossible, because those are the booth babes, the sales reps, and anybody worth their damn is off at a customer and really doing some useful work. I was really offended. I'm looking for stuff. And when we go to these events, you want to be able to talk to some geek, at least get to some level of understanding that, yes, okay, give me your 30-second pitch so I understand you, and then I'll either care or not care. That's on me. But don't be a complete idiot and say you're going to set up a 40-minute WebEx for me because I'm asking you a simple question about how your stack works. So vendors bother me. The second portion of vendors that bother me, and this occurred at RSA, and I'm not picking on RSA because I love the show. Our security fixes everything. Our next generation firewall is the next generation firewall, which is better than the prior next generation firewall. And that's their headline. What the hell do you do? Companies no longer can explain in simple terms what's going on, and this is a marketing and public relations fiasco. Geeks want to know, what do you got? Do I care? Maybe I don't care today, maybe I will next year. Just give me that 3 sentences. What do you do? And don't bullshit me in the process. So I get really, really annoyed at vendors that are promising that they absolutely do everything. We all know there's no way in hell they can, but they're sucking in an awful lot of the upper technical management people who are not technical enough not to buy into the bullshit that the vendors are putting out. Weaponization. No matter what technology comes out, it will be weaponized. We did it with iron. We wanted to be able to cook. Oh, good, I can stab a buffalo. We weaponized iron. When we look at any technological advance made in the last 6,000, 7,000 years, history often shows us the good side, but we as geeks ought to be able to very quickly understand well, look what they did with this. Look how they turned this into a bad thing, how they weaponized it. Just like the internet is not a weapon. Cyberspace, TCP/IP, none of these are weapons, are they? The original conceivers, Vint Cerf back in 1969, this is just fine, this is a little scientific experiment. Everything we create becomes weaponized. Everything you create becomes weaponized. And my suggestion is that when we come out with new technologies that are supposed to be good and helpful for ma and pa and business and the planet, that instead of listening to the marketing and PR folks again, and just concentrating on, this is going to make your life wonderful, we ought to say, this is going to make your life wonderful, but in 3 to 5 years, the bad guys are going to figure out how to really screw with you and cause hell. Maybe we should think about that before we massively deploy. We need to be thinking about the weaponization of all technology well before its broad-based acceptance and deployment. No matter what we come up with, whether it's IT-oriented, bio-oriented, we've got anybody see over here the TV show is off of 60 Minutes or one of the news shows in the US, and they've actually now been able to get brain waves to completely control the prosthetics on quadriplegics and allow them to pick up a glass, allow them to put food in their mouth, allow the prosthetics to really, really work all from brain control because they've got enough research into the neocortex to be able to identify which neuron packets are doing it and which sort of patterns. Absolutely awesome. So now in 10 years, at a ball game, you've got a lot of people who probably could not have gone to a ball game, whether it's soccer, baseball, football, and they're in their wheelchairs, they got the prosthetic devices, and some asshole decides to take control of it because it's on unregulated SCADA. It's not funny, dude. He's laughing. Well, I mean, the ice cream cone of the head, yeah, but we're all thinking it, yes, I know. But think of the bad. Think about taking over the wheelchair controls. Is that cybernetic? Is it cyber? Is it human? Is it bio? It's all an integrated technology that we're finally figuring out how to get bioelectronics to really work to each other. What about the bad stuff? What do we need to do from a defensive standpoint on the very, very beginning before we start trying to patch prosthetics in 10 years? I think that we've made that mistake for 4 decades and there's no reason to continue with it at all. Shitty defenses, my God, people. It's not you, them. The internet was created and we built this thing based upon the military, US military, and the Brits were involved, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And we called it fortress mentality. And the object made a lot of sense from an historical standpoint, that you got your castle, and inside the castle you got your king and your queen, you got some serfs, you got goats, vegetables, and you can live. And as long as there's nobody you can see from the top of your hill a long way, you can go out in the fields and plow a little bit and do something, but by and large then you've got your moat, and you got your drawbridge. We invented a drawbridge in 1969 when it came to the basis of the internet. And we had this mental confusion, which we still do. You're running a store, a beautiful chocolate store on Main Street. Do you want the bad guys coming into your store? He goes, no. Do you want the bad guys coming into your store? What if they like chocolate, dude? And what should we be looking for? This goes back to the human end of behavior. Looking at the behavior, detection mechanisms, and modeling. Yet fortress mentality and what we have done with connection and both connection and connectionless IP conversations is it's an either or binary condition. We treat the digital world as though it's binary, and it's not. There's lots of shades of gray in the middle. Not everything is black and white. It's not always on or off. So fortress mentality became the model to defend against bad guys on the internet when the DoD, Department of Defense in the US, came out with models in 83, 85, 87, and it went on, and now we are stuck into this somewhere in the middle. I want people, I don't want people, I trust people, I don't trust people, and then we're back to the concept of users. So until we have some new theory fundamental theoretical change of what we mean by defense and how we react to defense and how we detect and react to detected anomalies, if you will, in real time when it comes to users. And we improve this a far greater level than we currently have, we're still going to be reliant upon a model that was built electronically in the Cold War based upon defensive technologies from 6,000 years ago. I think we should be doing better than that today. This slide has been part of my discussion for 20 years, or at least certain versions of it, and it's coming up right now over in the Koreas as to what's going to happen over there. What a frickin' mess that is. But is cyber going to provoke kinetic? The United States has said, as a matter of policy, but the policy has not been disclosed exactly because it's classified, if you screw with us enough in the cyber world, we're going to nuke you. And we've left that open as a strong possibility. So for the last 30 years I've been at this, how much cyber arms talk, how much of this split between cyber, the technical, and the kinetic end of warfare have we really been looking at? And I would argue over 20 years ago, we knew that this was going to be coming, but again, we chose to ignore it. And right now, if you read the papers just over the last several days, this is actually becoming part of the policy discussions going on with the US and major allies around the world as to how to detect if a cyber event is escalatory enough to create a kinetic response, and then how do you contain it? This is all still part of our jobs, because we're running a whole big piece of this. And hopefully not the bombs and all the other stuff, but those triggering mechanisms, the analysis of the data, the integrity concepts of it. We don't have it together yet, and I just think by now we really, really should. The dirty word is user. So we give users this kind of stuff. Gobs and gobs and gobs of controls. Now I use Microsoft Word like the next fool. I have to. But I think I use 3 functions: indent, bullet, and font selection. I think that's all I use. That's all I care. Yet inside Word, there's, 9,000 different things you can do. How many people need them? Why don't we have stuff that is a little more suited for the average user? Let's make things a little simpler. We have the technology to make things simpler. This goes back to the vendor question. We're going to give them more features, so version 5.0 is better than version 4.5, and we have to have 13 menus more of stuff, instead of making it easier and simpler for the average user and consumer. Complexification is the antithesis of security. Yet, because of the marketing people, the PR people, product managers who really don't understand what's going on inside the hood of too many of these things, let's give them more, let's give them more, let's give them more, and we'll fix it later if anything ever goes wrong. Again, I got a problem with this. So then, all of this has created a thing that I call binary degradation, or graceful degradation. 8 years ago, I was with my kids in Paris, and the local McDonald's is called Quick. And we went in to get our burgers and a Coke or whatever it was one morning, and all the screens were flashing with NT40 errors. No, sir, sorry, we can't get you a burger, not until the servers. When are they going to be ready? Well, it could take several hours. Do you have a pen? Yes. Do you have paper? Yes. Can I make an order? No. The reliance upon the technology to such an extent that we have no fallback is going to be, we're going to be seeing a bunch of this coming up as these DDoS attacks and these other events are going on, because since we can't defend ourselves by removing the weapons enemy system, our only answer in many cases is to turn off the systems. We don't have mechanisms for degradation, reliable operation on some small subset of at least I can turn the water on and off. At least I could take your €5 and pay for my burgers. Some of the simple things that we all grew up on with paper and pencil have been erased under the concept of digital redundancy. RAID 1 will fix everything. Yet here we are. And again, this really bothers me. And as we get more and more down the road of information warfare and the cyber war and all the bad guys doing all that stuff, we're going to see more and more of this as well. Cloud bursts. I'm not sure I have a real strong opinion there, but right now, I'm not moving my universe to the cloud. I'm not recommending to any of my clients that they move too much of their universe to the cloud, because for me, there's just too many unknowns. Was it 2-3 weeks ago, and I'm not knocking them, but Microsoft's cloud went down for an hour, IBM's went down, Rackspace went down for a bit, and I'm really not sure that we have the proper technology, the resiliency at this point, or even the legal construct to be able to defend cloud operation. I'm just not sure we have it yet. And I'd have to talk to the lawyers. If I have 12,000 clients in this cloud and the bad guys come at me, can I shoot back? The answer is probably going to be no. That means I'm going to have 12,000 potential victims. Oh, if you play the game legally, yeah. I got a problem with that. So I think it's something, again, that we need to really look at from the human side. Look at this technical thing we're building from the human side and understand what the downside ramifications are before we go full tilt and blow into it until something really, really goes wrong. 4G. This is going to be cyber war 4G. Right now, what is this? No, it's not. What is this? It's a computer. It's not an iPhone. Fuck iPhones, no. It's not a Samsung either, dude. It doesn't matter. I'm getting up here to 50,000 feet. It's a computer. These things have, God, how much more power than we had in a mainframe in the 60s? You know. So how many of them are there? 2 billion now? Now we're going to, in a few years, my refrigerator is going to call my car to tell me that the milk is ready at the supermarket for me to pick up. ICS, SCADA, TCP/IP, all sitting on top of each other. We're going to have 20 billion intelligent endpoints. And for any of you that were in on the talk just before this one on the operating system and environmental pickups you can do with some really cool tools, this is going to, again, be a huge problem because we're recreating something that we've already got. We've been building up this incredible infrastructure for how many years? Now we're going to do it all over again, and it's all going to be mobile. But we have a perfect storm that's hitting. Has not hit yet. This is one of my predictions, and I hope I'm wrong, but so we're going to have billions of these intelligent endpoints, and I don't mean the users as being intelligent, because the users are by and large clueless. How many of them provide any level of security? These devices have no fundamental security mechanisms in them. Doing security right on them is really, really, really hard. And yet we're migrating the whole world to them. 680 million of Facebook's 1 billion users use it exclusively on mobile. That was a staggering figure to me. I didn't realize that. So then you got the backbone guys. Wow, our only job is to give you clean wire from point A to point B. Okay, fine, if that's your game, I get it. But then you got really smart bad guys. So how do we know whether an app is good or an app is bad? And there has been a little bit of work done in that area. But fundamentally, the misconception is, and I'll pick on Apple in this case, if the app comes in, we review it to make sure it's Apple approved. That mean it's safe? No, of course not. What they do not do is something we cannot expect them to do. Code review. Code review is a nightmare. Everybody in this room knows how hard it is to do really good code review, especially when you have your hostile element inside of it potentially going to be a time-triggered or event-triggered subroutine that you'll never see in a static-based code review. You're not going to see it. You have to have some sort of IPS mechanisms going on these mobile devices, but in single-user, non-multitasking environments, how are you going to pull that one off and have any power and battery time left to use the damn thing? We have some fundamental architectural problems the way these OSs are constructed and with what we're trying to do to them. So the perfect storm of security, the next one to hit, in my opinion, is going to be in mobile unless we really figure something out very, very quickly. Because if we're going to have 20 billion of these things, I am definitely worried. Now, some people in the mobile space say, what we're going to do is containerize our data. We're going to sandbox it. Well, that sort of has an attractive sound to it. But a show of hands here, how many of you in your office and your clients would you recommend that they put both their business data and their personal data on their same business device? This is what bring your own disaster is about. That's what they're trying to do. And sandboxing and containerization, I'm not a fan of, because people want these devices because they do the kind of cool things that for whatever version you like, you want. You don't want a whole brand new experience with a whole new email client, a whole brand new browser experience, and browsers are super, super easy to build, aren't they? They never screw up. And I want to have all that running my corporate data under the trust factor as well, that there will never, ever, ever be a breach of the container walls. So maybe count me as a paranoid security guy. This is going to happen to the containerization and application wrapping industry in mobile. Is it going to happen in 8 months, 18 months, or 4 years? I don't know. But it's going to happen because the technology is moving too quickly. There's going to be new OSs. We're going to have compatibility problems like we've never seen before. And we're going to allow the consumer vendors to run the whole show. So in the future, we got some more stuff to even worry about if I haven't scared you yet. Some things that I actually sit around and think about. And my wife says, why don't you just read Harry Potter? It's a lot easier. But I actually like geeking. So some of the things that really bother me, and are we ever going to have any privacy again? Oddly enough, there was an article today in Wall Street Journal, something I was reading this morning, and basically the argument is privacy was a 19th and 20th century concept that has zero value in a digital society. Well, I read that and I figured, whoa, geez, I got an awful lot of digital things I don't want you seeing. I got a lot of digital things I don't want my wife seeing. I got a lot of digital things I don't want my clients seeing. And privacy is absolutely fundamental, and it's a 1/X security function. And those comments came out of the US, not from over here, where, like in Canada, privacy has much more of a fundamental value than was ever really cognizant in the United States. So this bothers me that we have some leaders in our country that are saying, why should we even bother with privacy? It doesn't matter. And I've got a problem with that, and that gets back to technical and the human element issues. These things are cool. They finally figured out how the wings on a bee work and the wings on a bird work, and now we're electrifying them, and we're seeing all the little helicopters of the trade shows, and those are all really, really cool. The miniaturization efforts that are being led by largely DARPA in the United States and some other research organizations around the world are getting them down to the minuscule size, absolute minuscule sizes. So when you're in a meeting, a very sensitive meeting with your clients, and there's a fly buzzing around, do you swat it? What is it doing? Is it a biological entity? Is it an electronic entity? What do we do? So we know we're inventing this stuff, and my question is, what are the planned defenses instead of waiting for the disaster? What are some of the planned defenses? Now, this stuff's really cool. I love it. Go to a lot of places, and they say you cannot videotape. So I've got my little video recorder, and I've got my, this is not an iPhone, it's a computer, sir. I got my computer here and my little Vado here, and they'll tell me when the red light, so I tape over the red light so they can't see I'm videotaping. But what I'm building now is a pair of glasses that'll look more like somebody from the 1950s. CCD lens, audio camera, little RAM, and some Wi-Fi back here. How can somebody possibly tell me to take off my glasses and not record when I'm in one of these environments? How does that affect us at private meetings of high government? How does that affect espionage? How does it affect all of the other pieces of the spectrum of what we've seen already fall apart in the last 30 years with the new technologies that we know are coming? We don't have that sorted out, and it really, really bothers me. EMP and HERF, I got involved in this in the late 80s because my old engineering degree was in analog, and I really liked high power stuff because you could make things blow up, and that was kind of fun. So I got involved with the concept of EMP, what happens with nukes go off and the corresponding damage to electronics and what have you. And at a conference I was running called InfoWarCon in Washington, D.C., I found the son, a geeky, 16 or 17 years old, the son of a Russian mafia mobster from Brighton Beach, Brooklyn in New York, who had built a 1 terawatt EMP pulse engine. So we started shooting these things off down in Washington, D.C. until we got a phone call from the FAA, the airline. They say, and people knew we were there, they said, "Are you doing something you shouldn't be?" "No, sir. No, not us." But we did blow up a whole bunch of stuff. We had another gentleman do one, not quite as elegant. We wanted to prove that the technology had existed for over 120 years. So we took a piece of paper from Heinrich Hertz's documentation and experimentation from the 1880s, rebuilt it exactly. The only thing we did use was a car battery instead of the old galvanic cells. And we were putting out 300 megawatt pulses that were eating up digital cameras and old computers. My worry is this technology, as you've seen now, is going to be deployed as anti-drone defenses. It's being deployed in 747s for the military as massive warfare capabilities. When the bad guys get it, what's it going to do to your networks? Do you have any thoughts or defenses against it? Your senior leadership, management, doesn't care. They've never seen it, it'll never happen, therefore it's not going to be worth worrying about. That's the same problem we've been having for the last 30 years. This stuff is coming, absolutely coming, and every one of you in this room knows that an intermittent problem is the worst problem you can have. If it's broken, I can fix it. If it breaks every so often with no conditions I can relate to and I can't build context out of, I'm screwed. And these weapons are absolutely ideal for doing that. Nanotechnology. It absolutely astounds me that we're getting ready to build and release some degree of intelligence with swarming and chaotic theory that we do not understand the ramifications, derivations, or what downstream repercussions of what we're creating. We don't understand it. We know that swarming sets from the original von Neumann work in the 1940s, automata theory, means I can have two simple instructions and result in a completely chaotic environment. Now, the world that we live in certainly has a lot more than two instruction sets, which means that the amount of damage we can create can be far greater, just out of ignorance, and we don't understand the nature of this. So we're going to start deploying these things, whether it's inside our bodies for health reasons. Yes, that's a really good goal, I grant it. But as a bad guy, I'm sure I can come up with an awful lot of ways to hurt it as well. But the technology is going to become just like chemistry sets. When I was a kid, I had a 5, 6 years old little chemistry set, and the first thing we build is hydrogen sulfide, right? To clear out the room. Bad guys are going to get a hold of this. What are they going to do with it? I want you guys to figure that out ahead of time. What are the bad guys going to do with nanotechnology? And how is it going to help us, and how is it going to hurt us? All of these things that I'm talking about are the sums of my fears. These are the things I worry about. And unless I can get uploaded into a computer sometime in the next 20 years, I probably won't be around to see an awful lot of these things. But it really bothers me, and hopefully some of these things will bother you as well. And here's another one that a few of you might have been following. Anybody remember what happened in 1859, the Carrington Effect? We just had started building in the United States telegraph system. There was some in Europe as well at that point. And there was a solar flare, and it shut down the entire telegraph industry, both in the US and in Europe for several weeks, in fact, because nobody knew what the hell was going on. And it caused massive communication problems, mainly at that point, in order to be able to schedule trains, was the primary goal of it at that point. So this was a one-off event. But now, in the last 20 years or so, there have been a number of miniature Carrington events. And a Carrington event is really nothing more than a solar flare. But the ones that NASA, ESA, JPL, and the sun experts are predicting now is a thing called a CME, a coronal mass ejection. And so that'll give you a little bit of the perspective here. Now, it's not so much that there's going to be a hunk of fire 93 million miles long that's going to hit the Earth. That's not the worry. The worry is that the CME has the equivalent of several billion nuclear bombs worth of power. If one of these goes off on the right angle of the sun and we in the orbit are in the right place, what happens to this planet? That here is called a binary function. It shuts off.
In box 0.
In 0. And so this is a legitimate thing that if some of you are electronic engineers, there are some potential fixes or some defenses, and they're based upon time. There's some things we can talk about. But the big problem is they're talking about the cost just of the satellites alone. Think how much of this planet now runs, let's say it doesn't hit the transformers on Earth. Let's say the power grid does not get completely snafu'd. Let's say it's just what's in orbital and geosync. What happens then? Are we prepared for it? Again, we're not thinking enough about the technology and the downstream repercussions. And then, whether you're a Kurzweil fan or not, there's some fascinating reading out there. There's one called On Intelligence. Kurzweil has a new one on called Building a Silicon Brain, I think is its title. Series of books as well out on quantum consciousness and merging how the brain and electronics are going to be able to communicate and do things. And the singularity, fundamentally, according in Kurzweil's terms, are fundamentally saying by the year, and he's using 2035, there will be enough computing power to be able to upload a brain into a silicon object. Now, ignoring the spiritual and religious and all those other connotations, do we want that? That's another question. But, as we've seen from technology throughout history, if we can do it, we've done it. Are there protections? Is this the rise of the machines? Was James Cameron actually right? And you bring in and invoke your science fiction writers as well. But it is a technology that is absolutely coming, that from a sociological standpoint, from a religious and spiritual standpoint, we have no idea what's going to happen when the first guy's brain gets uploaded into a bunch of silicon. Can we turn it off? Will he feel the pain? Some really interesting questions that come along. And of course, I fear the unknown more than anything. In order to make this work on an offensive or a defensive basis, you need the three components: capability, will, and intent. And that's kind of where I'm coming to you guys. And I go to a lot of the community meetings around the world, trying to get you guys to think in some of the crazy ways that I'm thinking about what is coming down the line versus just worrying about today's exploits. What's coming on next, and what do we need to prepare for? And there's a few ideas we can do. Maybe we put in completely Machiavellian controls on absolutely everything that is in a user's hands, and you think down that line, then you realize it's just not going to happen. Still, the best USB port protection I have ever seen anywhere used is called super glue, and it works every time. Knowing who's saying what about who in the privacy realm, we have to keep privacy at the forefront of all of our security thinking, because they go absolutely hand in hand. Because if one of you actually believed that you had zero privacy at all about anything in your life, what's 100% transparent, it's going to radically change how you want to interact with your fellow humans and your fellow technologies. And it's very difficult for us to wrap our heads around what some of the people in Washington are now saying. Some of the stuff that we don't teach the new noobs in the field of history. They don't know what reference monitors are, back from the original work from Bell-LaPadula modeling. I've given a number of PhD reviews at various universities around the world, and the problem that I have is I'm not seeing anything new and really, really creative. The cool stuff's coming out of the community. What's happening, though, is it's not quite organized, not quite ready for prime time, as it might come out of an academic. So from the academics, I'm seeing completely derivative work. They rehash everybody else's, put it into a paper, and they get a PhD, and now they're supposed to be considered smart. I got a problem with them. Then you get the other guys who go, I've worked out this great new mathematical formula, and it must apply somewhere, but damned if I can figure out why, but please give me my PhD anyway. What we're missing is the middle ground of the practicality, the theory, the understanding that it is not only technical. How do we merge various disciplines together, make them much more interdisciplinarily relating to each other than they ever have? We've been stovepiping everything for so damn long, we've forgotten that all this stuff really, really works together. And so I'm praying over here that that's me in my backyard in Tennessee. And I want to teach history. I want to teach security history. It's not done, and even in some of the best programs. We don't embrace failure. Corporations don't want to hire you if you have failed. They only want to hire you if you've never done anything wrong or never had a bad experience. I was in the record industry for 15 years, and some of the shit that went down and collapsed around us gave me tremendous insight and perspective on how to deal when things go really wrong. Some of you may know the name Gene Schultz. He was a brilliant man in the security field in the United States. He died last year. And he and I went on, and his quote, he says, after all of the years, I don't understand why we don't have a self-repellent operating system. Beyond us, why have we not why have we not tried to do that? Because we go back to the vendor issues, backward compatibility, we're already entrenched. The whole mantra from IBM in the 1950s, like you think blue, if you got it all there, hell, we can't reconstruct it. But if we don't try, we by definition have chosen to fail. So we need to really try to do some of these things. Stopping DDoS. I'm having a talk with a friend of mine later. There are some interesting models and concepts on how to actually stop DDoS. And there's some math and some functions and some stuff you have to do, but it also doesn't mean you have to re-architect the entire planet to do it either. Why aren't we looking at these things in more of the open conferences outside of the community conferences than we have in the past? And I really, really, really want to hopefully encourage you to take a few of these ideas, assuming you don't think they're all completely wacko, and think about them, exchange ideas about being proactive in our defense instead of just kind of sitting back, because the alternative is then we chose to fail as well. I'd love to answer some of your questions, if I may. You guys have been absolutely awesome. I do have a couple more movies back here for folks that are interested in having a couple questions. Thank you very much. Questions? Anybody?
The gentleman at the back, and then your turn. Yeah?
If you have a question, if it's a good one, you got to move it. If it sucks, no.
Need the other. I would not be nearly as optimistic as you are being, I think, at the moment. For two reasons, which I think are related. The first is, in its most abstract, security is the framework in which civilization can flourish. And security in that very abstract term is always in tension with freedom, because you can have absolute security in the real world, but that would mean sacrificing all your freedom to act. And so it is very much in the world of governments to be concerned about security. I think they have every legitimate right to concern about it. But in the real world, we know what insecurity looks like. We don't really know what security looks like. And it's the same in the electronic world, because I'm not sure we want security, because actually, without defined freedoms to limit what security can end up in, we can end up in the world where, you know what, you can't jailbreak iOS anymore. You can't, corporates move in and they clamp down everything. It's perfectly secure, perfectly safe, but a very dull, boring, very limited world that I'm not sure we actually want to live in. That's point one. And I think the second point I would make is that as an industry, we fail because we put in solutions. Now, I'm of a similar age to yourself, and I remember when firewalls came in, right? And you know what? From my perspective, firewalls set back security about 15 years, because since they came in, every development organization I have worked with over the many years goes, well, we're behind the firewall. We don't have to fix anything anymore. So people have not thought about writing secure code or whatsoever because the firewall takes care of it. But then when they wanted to do things through the firewall, instead of opening the right ports and designing secure protocols and doing the job properly, they poked everything through sodding port 80, and they put binary protocols on top of a stupid text-based protocol and made things worse.
You've just embarked on some nice bar conversations. I'm in complete agreement. Your first point is the one that really resonates with me emotionally, is the interdisciplinary aspects of things. And if any of you ever have a chance to get into some of these really small meetings of 9, 10, or 15 people, you get an English major, and a historian, and a geek, and a doctor, and all these different kind of things. And if it's well organized, they bring in a good facilitator, and you spend 2.5 days drinking, golfing, hacking, throwing darts, and coming up with answers. And they're an absolute ball in order to get somebody's completely different set of views, because within our own community, while we may be really smart about a lot of stuff, we also have to admit we're also very myopic about our view of the universe. Other comments or questions? Yes, you get a movie for that. That was good. I agree with you.
I'm not sure if this is a comment or a question, but it occurred to me when you were talking earlier about apathy, that we might be suffering a kind of a cultural malaise from the mutual assured destruction period that we lived under as a species.
Well, I grew up in MAD. I don't have apathy, so therefore you're wrong. No. Culturally, that's a really good thing. Why don't people give a shit? And my gut reaction, my wife and I talk about this a great deal, is because of the concept of instant gratification. There's two things. You have instant gratification, I want it to be able to do now. If the website takes more than 3 seconds to load, I'm moving on, it's bad. Number two, which is another aspect of apathy, is the bad guys. Well, actually, let's take kids who are experimenting. When I was a kid, you do something stupid in the physical domain and somebody wraps you around the head. And you saw the results of the consequences. Today, kids, we don't teach them consequent management when you can't physically see the results. And those are two components that add to apathy. I guess I would never have thought about mutually assured destruction as being part of that, but that's why we bring sociologists into these discussions. Any sociologists here to answer that over drinks later? I love the questions. Any other comments? We have 1 minute and 22 seconds. Hey, I'm trying to keep on schedule. There's beer coming.
You talked a lot about taking people's weapons away. Now, I found it interesting because you drew a lot of parallels between personal defense and taking someone's attacking weapon away. Now, you're allowed to defend yourself because your life is in harm. Your direct physical integrity, that is why you're allowed to defend yourself. Now, are you talking about you defending your infrastructure by attacking another infrastructure directly, or having the legal framework for the government to directly take someone's network offline?
How about the automatic medicine dripping machines that are run on SCADA and ICS inside of hospitals that if those go down, suddenly you have a bunch of very sick and or dead people.
Okay, you raise a valid point when you integrate things further.
Yeah, infrastructure does not have to be, when you attack an infrastructure, you need to often look not at the primary, but you need to look at the downstream consequences and results of what occurs. If I turn off the sludge pumps in New Orleans, what's going to happen in 3 months? Everything doesn't have an immediate effect. You need to look at things, and I have some other things I talk about very heavily on time. What happens short-term, long-term? It's like smoking, right? Oh, you have 3 cigarettes when you're 12, you're going to be fine. You have 300 cigarettes a day for 70 years, you're fucked. So you got to understand the downstream ramifications of it, and then look at other cause and effect as well, because nothing is isolated. And if I attack an infrastructure, how is that going to spread out and have other effects? How is there going to be feedback that's going to come back and hit me in the face again because of something that was unpredicted and unknown down there? But at the end of the day, I think the rules should be the same. And I'm not suggesting that we go out and kill people. I'm suggesting that we have a proportional response, legal proportional response methodology where I can remove my adversary's weapon systems, is what I'm suggesting. And I think between the technology community and the legal community, that should be one of the first things that we do in the next couple of years. Yes? I'm now officially 1 minute over, so it's your fault. Go.
You see, yeah, like you just said, how far can you go in saying, yes, that's offensive or that threatens my system? Because you said, yeah, they attack the SCADA systems in the medicine industry, but can you then also state, like, in the for example, oh, the Russians won't deliver oil to us, so that brings us our entire economy and our life in danger. In fact, is it then allowed to attack them because it's just taking their weapon, what is not selling oil to you? How far can you go on this?
We had these discussions beginning in the Pentagon, believe it or not, like in 92 or 93, and it echoes military concepts very, very closely. In that if a soldier A on this side does one thing, what is the response, proportional response, without escalating it from the other side? So the first aspect of it is attribution, understanding where it came from, and that has to be done to a very high level, preferably minimum of 2 sigma, before you do anything else. The other thing I put up there, one of the final words, is intent. What is the intent? Oftentimes, and we've all seen it, that something goes wrong and it was like, oh shit, sorry, my bad, and things happen. So you need to understand the intent as well as the attack vectors before you can make any sort of determination. And there are procedures that have been developed, certainly well within the US military, that have not been commercialized yet, and maybe, God knows where they're going to go at this point, where we should be having some similar types of technologies available to us to be able to do attribution and intent. We've seen it with a lot of the APTs. Some of the data studies that have come out have been really good. Mandiant studies have been really, really good. And we're starting to learn how to collect the data and do the data mining at it, but we're still in the very early days of that. And nothing I'm suggesting here, and please do not get the idea that I asked any easy questions or that there are any easy answers. I don't think there are. All right, I know my time is up. Thank you so much, and I got a couple movies for you guys.